you will have noticed that my better prepared co-host is absent this week. Filling his British shoes is a non-Brit and a fellow coworker here at GigaOm, Darrel Kent. Welcome back to the good, the bad, and the techie. As in nearly every episode, I'm Howard Holton, CTO here at GigaOm, and with me today I have
Darrel Kent, field CTO at GigaOm, working for and with Howard Holton.
we've known each other for about 10 years now, I think. More than 10, about 11. I think we met in
trying to
2012.
put my finger on it, but I haven't done enough research to pin it down. But it's at least 10.
Yeah. I remember the day we met. Do you remember? You don't remember that?
It was on a golf course, was it not?
It was. It was at the beautiful golf course that's at Red Rocks, that's name is escaping me. And
Arrowhead.
Arrowhead. Yep. Which anyone that comes to Denver, if you get the opportunity, play Arrowhead. You get to golf inside Red Rocks. You'll feel awesome because you get about 10 more yards on every successful hit.
Well,
It's
and there's a lot of
stunningly
elevated
beautiful golf
tees,
course.
so you're shooting
Yeah.
and then bouncing, and it's rolling downhill. You can get a 400-yard drive if you really
You
really
can. Well, and the air's thinner, right? So those who are used to golfing at sea level are going to get some extra distance on all their hits. But
Yeah, that's
I
assuming you
had
have your golf ball after that hit, which I normally
well,
do.
that's yeah, but it's okay because I tend to find 13 other golf balls after my hit, so that works for me. Um, so my company was relocating from California to Colorado. Hitachi was probably our largest vendor other than Microsoft. Hitachi had a big office in Denver, and I wanted to meet some of the locals, and so I set up a round of golf, courtesy of Hitachi. Had my COO and my director of e-discovery operations with me. We decided to go golfing. They were more serious than I was, and Darrel was our Hitachi escort. So I said, "Hey, who's golfing after us?" "Oh, it's another Hitachi group." I said, "Sweet. Why don't we switch? You take one of theirs. I'll go with them. There's a seller from a VAR there. I don't have a VAR out here. I'll get to meet somebody. I'll get to meet some new people. There's a Brocade guy there. This should be a good time." And I suck at golf, and you guys are more serious, so I'll just go with these guys who probably also suck at golf, not knowing that one of them went to college on a golf scholarship. One of them played basketball with LeBron.
LeBron James in high school.
Yeah. So hell of an athlete. And then the other one was actually a pretty good golfer. And then me, the hacky schmuck, was the best golf game of my life, honestly. And Darrel and I started kind of working together as kind of vendee, and became friends and worked together when I was at Hitachi, in as much as we could, being in separate departments. And then I convinced him to retire from Hitachi and come on over here, and he has not yet killed me.
No, big decision. It was 150 fiscal quarters of work at Hitachi, which translates to over 37 years. So I was embedded. I bled Hitachi blood. Spent an awful lot of time in that organization in many, many different roles: product management, marketing, marketing. But most of it was in the field, either as an SE, a systems engineer, or an SE manager, or even a district sales manager. And at one time, I developed a global account program for Hitachi, and I ran that for about 5 to 7 years. So a lot of making sure stuff got built, and then making sure that stuff that got built got sold to people like you. And that's after another 14 years having worked at Mountain Bell, US West, later Quest, later CenturyLink, now Lumen, throughout all of that and throughout all the corporate raiders, I managed to get my pension funded out. It's sitting in my 401k, so that was all data center operations. So I came from a data center operations into a supplier of data center infrastructure and spent my 50 years doing that before I came over here.
So if you look back on the data center circa 1998, no, 1988 would have been when you went to Hitachi, right?
1986, yeah.
86, wow. So if you look back on the data center circa 1986, would it be a fair statement to say it changed just a scotch?
Yeah, a very fair statement. I mean, first of all, the raised floors disappeared. First, we were a raised floor data center, and one of the epiphanies I had was going out and seeing one of the newer communications. They did videos and content like that. Did a lot of editing. Did it on open systems. Did it on distributed systems. And I went to look at their data center, and their data center had no raised floor. Everything was overhead.
Yeah, overhead plenum, which I have to be honest, I'm not sure. I'm not sure I agree with. Right, we still build a lot of raised floor data centers, and we still have a lot of kind of 24-inch. When you were doing data centers, it was 12-inch plenums, maybe 18-inch plenums.
18 was
Yeah.
we built the data center specifically at 18. I don't think it was 24 at Mountain
No,
Bell.
24 is a very new
Yeah.
within the life cycle of data centers, right? And now we're getting even a little bit beyond 24.
I can tell you this. I spent a lot of time underneath that floor, pulling a lot of cables, and I had a thin enough body to where I didn't feel claustrophobic.
No, it was nice when 18 inches was claustrophobic. Everybody started moving to 24 inches, which was much better for my
Well,
fat ass.
and part of that was there were so many damn cables underneath that floor that you didn't have 18 inches anymore.
Well, it's also air volume, right? I can push significantly more air volume, allowing me to have more BTUs per tile per square
Well,
foot.
now you're thinking about the equipment. You're not thinking about the people. I'm thinking about the people here. Although you do need airflow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting to see kind of how the data center has evolved. And like, if we're being honest, I don't know how much we think about the mechanical systems of the data center, right? That's kind of been abstracted away from us for a long, long time,
Very much like
right?
coding.
Well,
Coding is
it's
an
very much like
abstract.
everything, right?
Yeah.
Everything continues to get abstracted away year over year, decade over decade, right? To the point where we get to cloud, right? In the infrastructure, even in IaaS, the infrastructure is abstracted away,
Mm-hmm.
right? Then the operating system's abstracted away in platform as a service, right? Then the platform's abstracted away in software as a service. We continue to get deeper and deeper into abstraction, and when you look at generative AI, there's yet another layer of abstraction, right? Almost the education can almost be abstracted away in some ways.
Oh, you're fundamentally abstracting away the final element, which is the human. At least that's the way I look at it. And abstraction, disaggregation. In the infrastructure, we went through disaggregation and abstraction. So we were disconnecting disks from arrays. We were disconnecting software from the control mechanisms of the arrays, virtualizing everything. And it just continued on and on and on to where we're at today, where it's so abstracted that all I need to do is download an app on my iPhone.
It's interesting because abstraction doesn't make any of those things go away.
No.
It just means that the inline administrator doesn't need to be aware of them, but someone does.
Someone does.
Right?
Eventually someone's got to code something. Eventually
it still comes back to silicone. It still comes back to electricity in wires. It still comes back to
Gates.
copper and fiber interfaces and gates, right? Like it still comes back to the fundamental operations of a computer that don't always work the way we want and or expect. My concern with abstraction is pre-abstraction, you had a logical evolution, right? You kind of started at this level and you continue to evolve your knowledge and get deeper and deeper and deeper into the systems and form a more and more and more complete understanding of how those things worked. With abstraction, you never have that opportunity. Not always, right? There is no logical evolution. It's almost an illogical evolution because you have to step out of the abstraction and step into something else. There is no continuous learning that gets you beyond the abstraction, and that is becoming harder and harder and harder to do.
Well, not only harder and harder and harder to do, but a lot of the people that know how to get behind the curtain have hair like mine, lack of and gray. And so the talent pool needs developed. And frankly, I sit on the board of the IT advisory board for the University of Regis here in Colorado, specifically to provide the industry view in the technology space of the type of curricula that needs to be developed to train the current students for this very purpose. And when you get down into the nuts and bolts of it, it is we are recreating wizards, and it is by the time they get to college, they are not aware of all of that. So it is a much longer trek for them because they have to unlearn everything they've already known, all the abstraction, all the ease, and then they have to relearn the computer science. Or
Well, and that adds another layer of kind of complexity, not in the learning itself, but really in if the day-to-day operations for most people never gets beyond the abstraction, right? If all you do is write in Python, and that's your job, right? Or Ruby or Java or some other language, or you use Copilot 90% of the time to write your code, right? Or you use low code tools to write your code, or you use other frameworks, right? Unity or Unreal to write your code. At what point does the knowledge that you picked up in that computer science course start to fade? At what point does the fact that most students will never reference that knowledge again make that knowledge worth less, right? And so, at what point do we start thinking about, hey, if you've got 4 years to get your CS degree, your bachelor's, do we get rid of the fundamental low level education and start focusing on those things that are more practical and reserve the low level education for those pursuing advanced degrees, post-grad?
I think it comes down to the type of person you are. And some of us are, for lack of a better word, engineers and analysts by nature. I'm one of those. I like getting into the weeds. I like looking at the relationship of things. I like understanding how things work, at least from the math and the computer science level. In fact, most people don't realize today in the current world that nothing happens unless a word of data is sitting in a register in a processor somewhere. That's computer science, and some people like that, and so they could focus on that completely as a Bachelor of Science, because you still need engineers, you still need manufacturing, you still need development, and you need people that understand that. Others are more interested in what's in it for me. How can I leverage this to get the best lifestyle and best income possible? And they'll be more practical.
Yeah, but I don't think that's a fair way to say it either, right? Because while you still need a register to hold a word to make all this stuff work, to make this stuff work, you don't need to know how the register holds the word.
Yeah, well, somebody does, but you don't necessarily need to. So
yes, but the developer developing the app does not.
No, because
Right?
they are now coding in what I call goofy languages, which is anything except assembler. And
At the same time, how many engineers understand how their application's actually used? How many engineers understand why the application exists in the first place versus these specs made it to a sheet that I'm now developing, right? I've had
I would
so
turn
many
that around
conversations.
and say how many engineers could benefit from knowing that.
No, well, but that's not the question, right? Very specifically, because we all know that you can always benefit from understanding how someone uses the code,
Mm-hmm.
right? But we know you can benefit from someone knowing how you use the code because you currently don't know how people use the code, right? And so when you look at the apps that make a lot of money, which is really the goal, this is all companies. The goal of companies is to have revenue, right? Then it becomes very hard to disparage those that work in those so-called goofy languages when those goofy languages output code that sells billions of dollars and thus
No,
has engineers that do understand why this stuff works and why people like it and what they want.
had I stayed in the systems programming group, I would have evolved in those goofy languages as well. Because even
Sure.
then, we had C lists and we had you know um, compiled languages that we coded in, all of that. And as you moved further and further away, you were invoking all the underneath stuff, but you didn't need to know it. You're absolutely right. It is what you were trying to do was get something accomplished, either an accounting routine or a user interface or access to some data somewhere. So they're valuable. They're just not part of my evolution, other than the most removed I think I ever got was basic. I never even bothered. And I probably shouldn't say this in a public recorded forum, but I never bothered with C or C++ or any of those other languages. Once you start selling multi-million-dollar infrastructures, that's the realm of somebody else's problem.
Yeah.
Although even selling those infrastructures, you should probably know how they're being used, and you need to have some kind of knowledge around the language and the processes and all of that. The more you know that, the more you can kind of connect with somebody that you're trying to convince this is the right thing to buy, which I did a lot with you. So I don't mean to throw them out the window.
No.
There's a use for them. And that use is speed and productivity to value, right? It gets the job accomplished quicker.
Yeah, so let's talk about the transition to analyst, because you keyed on a few things that remind me of being an analyst, right? One of which is helping people better understand how to solve real world problems with technology and language, right? I contend that the analyst game is a language game, right? The analyst game is taking different technologies and different products and trying to determine what are the nuanced differences between those that matter, not the nuanced differences that everybody shouts from the top of the world as though they matter, and when it comes down to it they really don't because no one uses them, but rather those that truly matter, right? And making sure that people are aware of what those are and why they matter and why they should matter and how you should think about them. And that's a very language based game.
So I'm going to agree with you 100% because that's been the most difficult part of the transition. Where I was at was more in terms of the broader words, the broader strategies, the strategy of transformation, the strategy of value-based implementations of strategy toward transformation. The operational efficiency, customer intimacy, performance superiority, the optimization, the modernization, and the infrastructure that all of that ran on to make that happen. And when I came into GigaOm, it was more around applications and tools. more so than infrastructure, at least immediately. And the broader part of that was in security, and security to me is 1986 rack F. you know, you know.
Yeah, I mean half of GigaOm's reports are security.
Now,
But
and so there was a language I had to learn. All of the SOARs, the SEAMs, the XDRs, NDRs, MDRs, all of there were acronyms and languages I had to learn that I never had a need to learn in the past. I actually had people that I managed, that knew that stuff, and I always called it as I progressed into a leadership role. I went into New Jersey mode, which is I know a guy, and so I was allowed to ignore it, if you will. And you can't do that here. Number one, because you have to be at least credible or knowledgeable. But to your point, the linguistic part of it is it's not the tool, it's not the technology, it's the use and the value to the business and the impact in actually making that stuff work, and which is people and processes. So in a way, it ties back to the business and the strategies, but it does it at the fundamental level. And so I always took those business strategies and drove them down into optimization, modernization at the infrastructure level, and somewhat on the processes in the data center and the operating of the data center. Now it's driving them down from the tools and the applications into the business operations model. Where am I going to get the talent? How does it impact my operating model? Do I want it to impact it in that way? Do I need it to impact it in that way? And why? What and why act now? I found that there's a need to be very, very specific in the language used. I can no longer use the broader terms that suited me so well for so long. And
well, and the industry uses broader terms, right? I was having a briefing yesterday with a vendor who's showing me their. I don't like any of the words they used, and I haven't settled on ones that I like. But what they were calling backup and restore for Kubernetes, right, for your Kubernetes estate, which I argued with them, it is not, and they do themselves a disservice by calling it that. Backup and restore has a specific connotation to it,
yep.
and what that means is it generates an image in our minds based on everything that we know, right? It's backup and restore is static, and it's always been static, and it likely always will be static, right? And we at some point have to get beyond that. We have to we have to learn that and understand that language is critical. Language forms thoughts and images in our mind. And we do ourselves a disservice when we choose the wrong language. We do our customers a disservice when we choose the wrong language. We do the market a disservice because we allow people to compete with us that do something that we don't actually do. And the market thinks we all do the same thing when in fact we don't.
And in an analyst position, that counsel, that advice is critical for its specificity. And that's what I'm part of the transition is, because I spoke fundamentally at the broader, the higher levels. I can say something that means backup and restore to me, but it says it in a different way. And the assumption is Howard knows what I just said. And I'm finding you cannot be in this position, in our positions, that loose or
agreed.
that broad, because the advice we're giving is specific to the successful outcome of our clients. And it's almost fiduciary, and
we should think about it that way for sure. Right?
Who are going to now translate, but there's an ownership almost a co-ownership that if they go do what you suggest they should look at doing, there's a responsibility there beyond just, here's a boat anchor, go install it.
Yeah, very
Now,
much.
you know,
And we allow marketing teams to frequently misuse or co-opt words
yes,
that then make us exhausted of those words, right? At some point, backup and restore became backup and recovery, not the same thing. Backup and restore became data protection, not the same thing. Data protection became backup, not the same thing, right? Snapshots became backup, not the same thing, right? And we effectively allowed what is marketing and product marketing teams to say, well, if we're squidgy with the definitions of these things, then we can say all these that we do all these things that we don't really do, but the market kind of demands. And if we look at our competitors, they're squidgy with the language too, and so we all have this kind of gentleman's agreement that we can be squidgy with the language.
which then translates into it's fundamentally worthless. Now, I cannot begin to tell you how many discussions we had internally at Hitachi around this particular topic. And my view was always, it's just a thing within this other strategy. The strategy is called operational discovery or business continuity or disaster recovery. And within those, you have all these things, some of which we just discussed.
Yes, but
and you should put them in their rightful place so that people understand exactly how to use them and the value they can expect out of them, as opposed to
well, and the risk to using them incorrectly,
or the risk of
right?
using
And
them,
that
which
ends up being
most
the
will do,
problem.
which most
Well, that
will
ends
do.
up being the problem in when we get squidgy with some of these terms, right? If you tell me it's a replacement for backup and I don't do backup and it's not a replacement for backup, then when I really need a backup, you've set me up for failure. And that
Right.
stuff happens all the time,
That's
right?
exactly right.
When you misuse terms, you being any vendor, not pointing it at you at all. When a vendor misuses the term zero trust, then it does two things. One, I start to lose value. I start to lose trust in the term zero trust, and I lose trust in the vendor, right? And it shows they don't actually understand what these things are. And when we have these things that are powerful, that are valuable, that get misused and misquoted so frequently, right? And analysts pile on and exacerbate the situation, then the market starts to lose faith in things that we really, really, really need to have adopted.
Yes. Yes.
Right.
One of my most interesting and funnest conversations I had in the last month was a client came to us and they wanted to do a briefing on an announcement they were going to do the following day. They wanted to make sure we were aware of it. And so they showed us the deck. And as they're going through the deck, they had one word in there that I said, you might want to rethink that one. Number one, it's tired. Number two, it doesn't do what I think you mean it does. And people are just gonna, once they get to that, they're just gonna disconnect. You're now marketing. You're no longer positioning. You're no longer showing value. You're no longer actually showing them what you're doing. And the magic that produces the value that delivers the outcome that you're trying to get through this briefing. That turned into an hour-long session on messaging, which was extremely fun because it comes down to what exactly are you trying to do? How does this connect to the thing you are trying to drive, and how can you do that while maintaining interest and people aren't checking out and reading newspapers, which shows you how old I am, or scrolling on an iPhone.
Well, I like the use of magic, and we'll leave our listeners and viewers with this, right? A lot of what we do kind of is magic. We're adding capabilities to organizations that they didn't have before in ways that ideally don't add a huge lift, and they sometimes can be magic. When marketing gets a hold of terms and misuses them, magic suddenly becomes sleight of hand.
Oh,
And when they're egregious about it, that sleight of hand becomes us looking at it from the side. We can now see how the trick's done. And we can see that it's a trick and it is no longer magic.
it's no
And it
longer
undoes
trust.
the very thing. Correct. It
Yeah.
undoes the very thing that you set out to do. And
So
you've shown there is in fact no magic. So I think
I
we'll leave
agree.
our listeners with that.
Well, since you asked about the transition, I will say this: it's been a challenge, but it has been fun as hell. So I'll leave you with that much.
Well, on that note, like, subscribe, share, comment. If you've got something you want to say and you want to be a guest on the podcast, please reach out. We'd love to have you. We'd love to at least talk to you. Let's put it that way. Thanks for joining us this week, Darrel. And we'll see everybody next week on The Good, the Bad, and the Techie. Have a great day.
Take care.